I'm Lauren Parker, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be the one to expose my sister's darkest side. At Allison's 10th anniversary party, surrounded by champagne and fake smiles, I watched in disbelief as she slipped something into my glass when she thought no one was looking. A lifetime of her betrayals flashed before my eyes as I made a split-second decision that would change everything. I quietly switched our glasses with her husband Nathaniel's. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Growing up in the comfortable suburbs of Boston, I always lived in Allison's shadow. 3 years older than me. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Her charisma worked like magic on everyone around us. Teachers would light up when they realized I was Allison Parker's little sister, expecting the same effortless charm and social grace. Unfortunately for them, I was more comfortable with books than crowds, more interested in art than popularity contests. Our childhood home was filled with Allison's achievements. Trophies from debate competitions lined the fireplace mantel. Certificates for community service covered the refrigerator door. Photos of Allison shaking hands with local politicians adorned our living room walls. My artwork occasionally made it onto the refrigerator, but was quickly replaced by her latest accomplishment. The pattern of betrayal started small. When I was 12, Allison borrowed my favorite blue sweater without asking and returned it with a coffee stain. When I complained to our mother, Catherine simply said, "You should be flattered she wanted to wear your clothes." When I was 14, Allison told her friends about my embarrassing first-period accident at school after promising to keep it secret. Dad just laughed it off as sisters being sisters. But as we grew older, the betrayals cut deeper. Junior year of high school, I finally worked up the courage to ask Jason Fletcher to prom. He was kind, thoughtful, and shared my love for photography. The night before prom, Allison helped me get ready, curling my hair and offering makeup tips with sisterly affection. When Jason arrived at our door, Allison greeted him in the entryway while I finished getting ready upstairs. 30 minutes later, I came downstairs to find them gone. A hastily scribbled note explained that Jason and Allison had connected and decided to go to prom together instead. They thought I would understand. My parents' response? Allison and Jason make more sense together. She's more his type. Senior year brought another crushing blow. I spent months preparing my portfolio for a prestigious art scholarship. Watercolors, charcoal sketches, and mixed media pieces carefully selected to showcase my growth as an artist. The night before the submission deadline, I found my portfolio soaked with water, the colors bleeding together into an unrecognizable mess. Allison claimed our dog knocked over her water bottle near my work. The fact that our dog had been staying with our grandparents that weekend was apparently irrelevant. College offered temporary escape, but family gatherings remained minefields. At my college graduation dinner, Allison accidentally spilled red wine on my white dress minutes before I was supposed to meet the director of an art gallery about a potential job. The interview didn't go well with a massive stain down my front. The apologetic look on Allison's face seemed genuine, but the pattern was becoming unmistakable. The final straw came when Allison began dating Thomas, my ex-boyfriend, just 2 weeks after our breakup. Thomas and I had dated for 2 years during college, and the split was still fresh and painful. When I confronted her, Allison insisted that Thomas had pursued her and she couldn't help falling for him. Our parents told me I was being selfish for not wanting my sister to be happy. After that betrayal, I made a clean break. I packed my belongings, accepted a marketing job in Chicago, and built a life 800 miles away from the family dynamics that had suffocated me for years. The distance was healing. In Chicago, no one knew me as Allison's little sister. I was just Lauren, the creative marketing strategist who brought fresh ideas to campaigns. Over 8 years, I climbed the corporate ladder, eventually becoming the creative director at a respected digital marketing firm. My apartment in Wicker Park became my sanctuary, filled with books, art, and friends who valued me for myself. The occasional phone calls with my parents were cordial but brief. Allison and I spoke only during major holidays, exchanges filled with surface-level pleasantries and carefully avoided topics. 2 years ago, at a digital marketing conference in New York, I met Marcus. Tall with kind brown eyes and a warm laugh, he was refreshingly straightforward and genuinely interested in my thoughts. Our relationship developed slowly, built on respect and open communication. After 6 months of dating, I finally told him about my complicated family history. Instead of dismissing my experiences as overreactions, he listened carefully and validated my feelings. With Marcus, I experienced what a healthy relationship should feel like. Then, 6 months ago, my father had a heart attack. The family crisis brought Allison and me back into each other's orbits. During the long hospital visits and worried conversations in sterile waiting rooms, Allison seemed different, more mature. She apologized for being competitive when we were younger. She asked about my life in Chicago with what appeared to be genuine interest. She complimented my work when she saw my company's campaigns online. Weekly phone calls became our new normal. Allison shared stories about her life with Nathaniel, a successful investment banker she'd married 9 years ago. She talked about her volunteer work with local charities and her position on the board of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. She seemed to have grown into a caring, community-minded adult. When the invitation to their 10th anniversary party arrived, hand calligraphed on heavy cream stationery, I was hesitant. Marcus, ever supportive, encouraged me to go. "People change, Lauren," he said, his arm around my shoulders as we looked at the invitation on our kitchen counter. "Maybe this is your chance to heal old wounds. What if it's just another setup?" I asked, memories of past humiliations still fresh despite the years. "Then we'll leave," he promised. But what if it's not? What if she really wants to make amends? That tiny spark of hope, the childish wish that my sister could actually love me, won out. I RSVP'd yes, booked our flights to Boston, and allowed myself to believe that perhaps people really could change. Allison and Nathaniel's lakeside mansion stood as a monument to their success. Sprawling over what must have been at least 5 acres, the colonial-style home featured white columns, floor-to-ceiling windows, and immaculately landscaped gardens that sloped gently down to the private dock on Lake Cochituate. A valet took our rental car as Marcus whistled softly under his breath at the display of wealth. "Your sister has done well for herself," he murmured as we approached the grand entrance. "Nathaniel comes from money," I replied, "and he's genuinely good at what he does." The interior was even more impressive. Marble countertops gleamed in the chef's kitchen. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. A small army of staff circulated efficiently through the rooms, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The anniversary celebration was clearly no small affair, with at least 60 guests mingling throughout the first floor. Allison spotted us immediately. She floated across the room in a designer gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves. She air-kissed both my cheeks before giving Marcus the same treatment. "Lauren, you look absolutely gorgeous," she gushed, her eyes scanning my simple black cocktail dress. "That dress is so flattering on your figure. Have you lost weight?" The compliment felt off somehow, too eager, too excessive. I thanked her politely while trying to quell the familiar unease her presence always triggered. "And Marcus, so handsome. I'm thrilled you both could make it." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she linked her arm through mine. "Let me introduce you to everyone." Unlike Allison's performative warmth, Nathaniel's greeting felt genuine. Tall with salt and pepper hair despite being only 40, he gave me a warm hug and shook Marcus's hand firmly. "The famous Lauren," he said with a smile. "Allison's been talking about your visit all week." I'm glad we finally get to spend some time together. As Allison paraded us around the room, introducing us to friends and colleagues, I noticed the strange reactions some people had upon meeting me. Allison's in-laws, Harold and Diane, regarded me with cool politeness, their smiles tight and formal. A college friend of Allison's raised her eyebrows when we were introduced. "So glad you made it despite everything that happened at Christmas," she said cryptically. "Christmas?" I asked, confused. I hadn't seen Allison or her friends last Christmas. "Oh," the woman backpedaled quickly, glancing at Allison. "Maybe I'm thinking of someone else." Another guest, an older man I was introduced to as Nathaniel's business partner, shook my hand with unexpected sympathy in his eyes. "Allison wasn't sure you'd come because of your issues," he said. "Good for you for putting family first." Before I could ask what issues he was referring to, Allison whisked me away to meet another group. Throughout these introductions, I caught fragments of conversations about me. "That's her sister, the one who I heard she had problems with." Allison's been so supportive despite the pieces didn't fit together. But the pattern was clear. Allison had been telling stories about me, crafting some narrative I wasn't privy to. As the evening progressed, Allison's behavior became increasingly strange. She made subtle digs about my career. Digital marketing sounds so interesting, though I imagine it's stressful not having the security of a more established field. And my apartment. Studio apartments can be so cozy, almost like dollhouses. Every 20 minutes or so, I noticed her checking her phone and exchanging glances with two women I recognized as her longtime friends, Heather and Samantha. The three of them kept looking in my direction and whispering. It reminded me of high school, of the times I'd enter a room to find Allison and her friends suddenly going silent. While Allison networked the room, I found myself in a surprisingly pleasant conversation with Nathaniel about his investment firm. Unlike many financially successful people I'd met, he asked thoughtful questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "Your campaigns for that children's hospital were brilliant," he said, referring to a pro bono project my firm had completed last year. The storytelling approach really connected with donors. "You've seen my work?" I asked, surprised. "Allison shows me whenever you're featured in industry publications," he said. "She's quite proud of you, you know." That didn't align with the subtle undermining I'd been experiencing all evening. But before I could probe further, Allison reappeared at my side with a colorful cocktail. "You have to try this," she insisted, holding out the glass. The bartender created it specially for the party. "I'm good with water for now," I said, showing her my half-full water glass. "Early meeting tomorrow." Annoyance flashed across her face before she recovered her smile. "Just one won't hurt. It's our anniversary." When I again declined, she visibly fumed before recovering her composure and moving on to another group of guests. Throughout the next hour, she returned 3 more times with different drinks, each time becoming more insistent. Marcus had found potential clients among the guests and was deep in conversation across the room. I used the opportunity to visit the powder room, taking a short detour down a quiet hallway to gather my thoughts. As I approached the partially open door of what appeared to be Nathaniel's home office, I heard Allison's voice. "Everything's set for 9:30, she was saying. "Heather has the perfect angle to get it all on video." "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Another female voice responded. "What if she notices?" "She won't," Allison replied confidently. "Lauren always accepts drinks from people she trusts." Her big mistake. "And you're sure it'll work in time for the speech?" 20 minutes max. Just enough time for her to get to the podium before disaster strikes. "Trust me, this will be epic." I stepped back quickly as the door began to open, ducking into an adjacent room until they passed. My heart hammered in my chest. The plan, the video, the drinks Allison kept pushing on me. Something was definitely wrong. When I returned to the main room, Allison was standing on a small platform set up near the grand staircase, tapping a spoon against a champagne flute for attention. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please. In 15 minutes, we'll be having our anniversary toast with the crystal glasses Nathaniel's grandmother left us. After that, we have a special guest speaker." Her eyes found me in the crowd. "My dear sister Lauren has prepared some thoughts about marriage and family loyalty." I hadn't prepared any speech. I hadn't been asked to speak at all. But before I could process this new information, the servers began arranging crystal flutes on silver trays, and Allison disappeared into a side room where the bar had been set up. The announcement created a buzz of anticipation among the guests. Special anniversary toast. Family heirloom crystal glasses. A speech I knew nothing about. My stomach tightened with familiar dread as I watched Allison direct the staff with military precision. From my position near the windows, I had a clear view of the side room where Allison was personally arranging the crystal glasses on a silver tray. The server stepped away momentarily to retrieve more champagne, leaving Allison alone with the glasses. That's when I saw it. With a quick glance over her shoulder, she reached into her clutch purse and removed a small packet. Her manicured fingers tore it open, and she tipped white powder into one of the crystal flutes. The motion was practiced, efficient. She gave the glass a subtle swirl before placing it precisely at the front corner of the tray. I felt suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. My sister had just drugged a glass I was certain would find its way to me. The server returned with bottles of champagne, and Allison directed the pouring with a practiced smile. I watched as she pointed to each glass, saying something I couldn't hear. When she picked up the tray herself instead of allowing the server to distribute the drinks, my suspicions were confirmed. Marcus appeared at my side. "Everything okay? You look pale." Before I could respond, Allison approached with her tray of crystal glasses. "Special glasses for family only," she announced, her voice carrying just enough to make the distinction clear to nearby guests. She handed the first glass to Nathaniel, then one to Marcus. When she reached for the glass at the front corner of the tray, the one I'd watched her tamper with, her eyes met mine with false warmth. "And for my dear sister," she said, extending the glass toward me. I accepted it with a smile that matched hers in insincerity. Nathaniel stepped forward to make his toast, thanking everyone for joining their celebration. As he spoke about the journey of marriage and the importance of honesty, I assessed my options. I could confront Allison immediately, creating a scene and potentially embarrassing myself if I couldn't prove my accusation. I could accidentally drop the glass, but that would only delay whatever she had planned. Or I could play along and find evidence of what she was doing. The opportunity came when Nathaniel finished his toast and turned to embrace Allison. In the moment when all eyes were on the happy couple, I smoothly switched my glass with Nathaniel's, the movement concealed by the crush of people moving forward to congratulate them. Allison raised her glass high. "To family loyalty and second chances," she declared, her eyes finding mine with a meaning only I understood. Everyone drank. I brought the glass to my lips, but didn't swallow, maintaining eye contact with Allison as she emptied her glass. Nathaniel drained his glass as well, placing it on a passing server's tray. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of conversation and forced smiles. I positioned myself where I could observe Nathaniel without being obvious. At first, nothing seemed amiss. He laughed with friends, shook hands with business associates, kept his arm around Allison's waist as they accepted congratulations. Then I noticed the first signs. A slight furrow of his brow. A subtle shift in his posture as he pressed a hand against his stomach. He excused himself from a conversation, looking momentarily confused. When he returned a few minutes later, his face had a slight sheen of sweat, and he tugged at his collar as though suddenly uncomfortable. During a lull in the music, I approached him under the guise of asking about a painting on the wall. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked quietly. "You seem uncomfortable." Actually, I'm feeling a bit off, he admitted, his words slightly slurred. Might have had too much champagne. Here. Let me help you sit down, I offered, guiding him to a nearby chair. Across the room, Allison's eyes widened as she took in the scene. She quickly excused herself from her conversation and hurried over, panic replacing the smug satisfaction that had been on her face all evening. What's happening? She demanded. Voice pitched higher than normal. Nathaniel's not feeling well, I said calmly. He seems disoriented. Almost like he's been drugged. Her face drained of color. That's ridiculous. He probably just had too much to drink. Actually, he's only had 1 glass of champagne, I pointed out. The one from the toast. The one you handed him. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed immediately by horror. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength and pulled me toward an empty study off the main hallway, closing the door behind us. What did you do? She hissed. All pretense gone. I met her gaze steadily. What did you put in my drink that's now affecting your husband? I don't know what you're talking about, she attempted. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Should I call poison control? I asked, pulling out my phone. Or maybe announce to your guests that someone tampered with the drinks? Don't you dare. She whispered furiously. It wasn't poison. Then what was it? She hesitated, calculating her options before finally answering. Just a combination of laxative and mild sedative. Nothing dangerous. Just enough to make me have an embarrassing bathroom emergency in the middle of a speech I didn't know I was giving, I concluded, with Heather recording the whole thing. I assume her silence was confirmation enough. Where's her phone set up? I demanded. After more resistance, Allison finally admitted that Heather had positioned her phone on a bookshelf in the library where I was supposed to give my surprise speech. The angle perfectly captured the podium and would have documented every moment of my humiliation. It was just supposed to be a harmless prank, Allison insisted, though we both knew it was far from harmless. A prank you were planning to record and share with who exactly? I asked. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. I already knew. Family, friends, possibly social media. The ultimate humiliation, captured forever, with me as the unwitting star. A knock at the study door interrupted our confrontation. One of the servers looked concerned as he poked his head in. Mrs. Wilson, your husband is asking for you. He says it's urgent. Allison composed herself quickly. Tell him I'll be right there. As the server left, I fixed her with a hard stare. Your husband needs you because he consumed whatever you intended for me. She pushed past me without responding. I followed her back to the main room, where Nathaniel was now visibly distressed, his face pale and sweaty. I need to use the bathroom, he muttered to Allison. Something's wrong. Let me help you. I offered, supporting his arm while Allison stood frozen. I'll handle this, she snapped, finally springing into action. You've done enough. Together we managed to help Nathaniel upstairs to their master bathroom, away from the curious eyes of guests. While he was inside, Allison paced the bedroom, occasionally checking her phone with agitated movements. You need to fix this, she demanded. Fix what exactly? The situation you created. I kept my voice calm. What's in your group chat, Allison? The one with Heather and Samantha. Her head snapped up. You went through my phone? No need. I saw you three texting all night while looking at me. Not exactly subtle. She clutched her phone tighter, but I was faster. Years of handling presentations in high-pressure situations had given me quick reflexes. I snatched the phone from her hand and stepped back quickly. Give that back, she hissed, aware that raising her voice would attract attention from guests downstairs. Password? I asked, holding the phone just out of reach. I'm not giving you my password. Fine. I'll wait for Nathaniel and we can ask him to unlock it. I'm sure he'd be interested in what you've been planning. The threat worked. She gave me the password, her face a mask of fury. I opened the group chat titled Sister Surprise and began scrolling through hundreds of messages dating back weeks. The plan had been in works since I'd accepted the invitation. Details about what substance to use, when to administer it, how to ensure I would be the center of attention when it took effect. Discussions about camera angles and lighting. Debates about whether to share the video with just family or post it online. Allison had been the ringleader, with Heather and Samantha eager accomplices. As I scrolled further back, more disturbing messages appeared. References to previous pranks they'd pulled on me, including incidents I'd never connected to Allison. "You tripped me at Jessica's wedding," I said, looking up from the phone. "That wasn't an accident." Allison didn't respond. "And the blind date who stood me up at the family reunion last year. That was you? You paid him to agree to meet me and then not show up." Still silence. "And these rumors about my drinking problem? Is that why your in-laws were looking at me like I might steal the silver?" "You don't understand," she finally said. "It was just jokes." "Jokes?" I repeated incredulously. "You've been systematically humiliating me for years and calling it jokes?" The bathroom door opened, and Nathaniel emerged looking slightly better, but still unsteady. His eyes moved between us, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" he asked. I texted Marcus to meet us in the study, then turned to Nathaniel. "I think we should continue this conversation somewhere private." Back in the study, with the door firmly closed, I carefully explained what had happened. Nathaniel listened with growing disbelief as I showed him the group chat messages on Allison's phone. "You plan to drug your own sister?" he asked Allison, his voice hoarse. "At our anniversary party?" "It wasn't like that," she protested. "It was just supposed to be funny." "Funny?" Nathaniel repeated. What exactly would have been funny about Lauren having a medical emergency during a speech? "You don't understand," Allison insisted. "Lauren always plays the victim. She's always trying to get everyone's sympathy." I watched my sister transform before my eyes, her carefully constructed persona crumbling to reveal the person she'd always been. The jealous, resentful person who had made my childhood a series of betrayals and gaslighting. "How am I playing the victim when I have literal evidence of you plotting against me?" I asked, holding up her phone. Allison changed tactics, her expression softening as she reached for my hand. "Lauren, please. If you make a big deal out of this, it will ruin everything. I'll make it up to you. I can introduce you to potential clients, help your business grow." She was trying to bribe me into silence. The realization was almost laughable. A soft knock preceded Marcus entering the study. He took in the scene with a quick glance, then moved to stand beside me. "What's happening?" he asked. Before I could answer, Nathaniel spoke. "My wife drugged my drink. It was apparently intended for Lauren." Marcus's expression hardened as he looked at Allison. "You did what?" Allison began to cry, the tears looking remarkably genuine. A performance I'd seen many times before when she was caught doing something wrong. "It's all a misunderstanding," she sobbed. "Lauren is blowing everything out of proportion like she always does." "Show him the messages," I said to Nathaniel, who was still holding Allison's phone. As he scrolled through the group chat, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "There are hundreds of messages here. This wasn't impulsive. You planned this for weeks." Through the closed door, we could hear guests beginning to notice the absence of the hosts. The murmur of conversation had changed tenor, questions about where Allison and Nathaniel had gone becoming more frequent. "We need to go back out there," Allison said, reaching for her phone. "We can discuss this later." "No," Nathaniel said firmly. "I want to know exactly what was in that drink and why you thought this was acceptable behavior." As Allison struggled to control the situation, the door opened again. Heather and Samantha peered in, their faces showing concern that quickly shifted to alarm when they saw Nathaniel holding Allison's phone. "Everything okay in here?" Heather asked cautiously. "No," Nathaniel replied. "Everything is not okay. I believe you both have some explaining to do about this group chat and the plan to drug and humiliate my sister-in-law." Heather and Samantha exchanged panicked glances as they realized what was happening. Their discomfort was palpable as Nathaniel confronted them with specific messages they had sent in the group chat. "I can't believe you two encouraged this," he said, his voice tight with anger. "These aren't pranks. This is deliberate cruelty." "It was just supposed to be funny," Samantha protested weakly. "We didn't think about it as drugging someone." "What did you think putting laxatives and sedatives in someone's drink was, if not drugging them?" Marcus asked, his arm protectively around my shoulders. "Allison said it was harmless," Heather offered lamely. "She said Lauren would laugh about it later." I looked at them both, these women who had enabled my sister's worst behavior for years. "Would you laugh about being publicly humiliated? Having a video of your most embarrassing moment shared with everyone you know?" Their silence was answer enough. "I need everyone out of my study right now except Allison," Nathaniel said, his controlled tone more frightening than if he'd shouted. "Go make our excuses to the guests. Say I'm not feeling well." Which is certainly true. As Heather and Samantha scrambled to leave, Nathaniel turned to me. "Lauren, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Allison was capable of something like this." "This isn't the first time," I said quietly. "Just the first time she got caught." Marcus squeezed my shoulder. "Do you want to leave? We can go back to the hotel." I considered it for a moment. The temptation to escape this toxic situation nearly overwhelming. But something kept me rooted in place. Perhaps it was finally having evidence of what I'd experienced for years. Perhaps it was the validation of having witnesses to Allison's true nature. "Not yet," I decided. "There are things that need to be said." Nathaniel nodded, then turned to Allison, who had been uncharacteristically silent during this exchange. "How long have you been doing things like this to your sister?" "You're overreacting," she attempted, but the words fell flat. "Answer the question, Allison," he insisted. "It's not like that," she protested. "Lauren has always been jealous of me. She twists everything to make herself look like the victim." Before anyone could respond to this blatant lie, the study door opened again without a knock. Heather returned, her expression anxious. "Your parents just arrived," she said. "They're asking what's going on." Allison's face brightened with hope. Our parents had always taken her side, always believed her version of events. She pushed past Heather and hurried toward the main room. By the time the rest of us arrived, Allison was already speaking rapidly to our parents, her body language conveying distress. Catherine and Richard Parker looked concerned as they listened to whatever story she was spinning. As we approached, my mother turned to me with disappointment clear on her face. "Lauren, what have you done now? Allison says you're trying to ruin her anniversary party with wild accusations." The familiar dynamic snapped into place so quickly it was almost dizzying. Allison accused. I was blamed without even being heard. But this time was different. This time I had evidence. This time I had witnesses. "What I've done," I said calmly, "is discovered that Allison put drugs in a drink intended for me. Nathaniel consumed it by mistake." My father scoffed. "That's ridiculous. Why would Allison do something like that?" "To humiliate me," I replied. "She planned to record me having a medical emergency during a speech I didn't know I was giving, then share the video." "Lauren has proof," Marcus added, his steady presence beside me providing strength. "And who are you?" my father demanded. "This is Marcus, my boyfriend," I said. "And he's right. I have proof." Nathaniel stepped forward, Allison's phone in hand. "It's all here in her messages with Heather and Samantha. Detailed plans to drug Lauren tonight." My parents looked bewildered. The script they were accustomed to suddenly rewritten. My mother reached for the phone, scrolling through messages with increasing dismay. "Allison, what is this?" she finally asked, looking up at her favorite daughter. The remaining guests had fallen silent, watching the family drama unfold with uncomfortable fascination. Allison's in-laws stood nearby, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror as they pieced together what was happening. Allison attempted to salvage the situation, her voice breaking with calculated emotion. It was just supposed to be a silly prank. Lauren is making it sound so much worse than it was. A prank? Nathaniel repeated incredulously. Drugging someone is not a prank, Allison. It's assault. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Several guests gasped. Allison's carefully constructed image was crumbling before an audience of her peers, colleagues, and family. You've always taken her side. Allison suddenly shouted at our parents, her composure finally shattering completely. Even now, you're looking at me like I'm the villain when she's the one who switched the glasses. She's the one who made my husband sick. Because you were trying to drug me, I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You always get everything I want without even trying. Allison screamed, years of resentment pouring out. Everyone loves Lauren the artist. Lauren the creative one. Lauren who's so authentic and real. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to be perfect? And you just exist and people adore you. The raw truth of her jealousy silenced the room. My parents stood frozen, finally confronted with the reality they'd ignored for decades. I'm going to the hotel, Nathaniel announced, his voice cutting through the tension. I can't stay here tonight. Nathaniel, please, Allison begged, reaching for his arm. He stepped away from her touch. Don't, he said quietly. I don't know who you are right now. As he moved toward the door, my parents seemed to snap out of their shock. My father approached me, his expression a complex mix of confusion and dawning realization. Lauren, has this been happening all your life? He asked, his voice unusually hesitant. Years of suppressed pain and anger bubbled to the surface. Yes, I said simply, and you never believed me. Not once. My mother joined him, her hand reaching for mine. I stepped back, not ready for her touch after so many years of dismissal. We thought you were exaggerating, she said. Sisters have conflicts. We thought it was normal. Drugging someone isn't a conflict, Marcus pointed out. And from what Lauren has told me, this is just the latest in a long pattern of deliberate harm. Allison, seeing her parents' wavering loyalty, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. She lunged toward me, her face contorted with rage. You've ruined everything. Marcus and Nathaniel moved quickly, intercepting her before she could reach me. The physical attack, witnessed by the remaining guests, was the final break in Allison's carefully constructed facade. I think it's time for us to leave, I said to Marcus, suddenly exhausted by the emotional maelstrom. Lauren, please stay, my father pleaded. We need to talk about this as a family. I've been trying to talk about this my entire life, I replied. You weren't ready to listen then. I'm not sure you're ready now. As Marcus and I moved toward the door, I heard my mother's voice behind me. We'll call you tomorrow. Please answer. I nodded without turning around, stepping out into the cool night air with a strange mixture of grief and liberation washing over me. Behind us, the beautiful anniversary party lay in ruins, much like the relationship it had been meant to celebrate. The drive back to our hotel was silent. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine as I stared out the window at the passing streetlights. The weight of what had just happened settled over me like a heavy blanket. After years of gaslighting and manipulation, the truth about Allison had finally been exposed. But victory felt hollow, tinged with grief for the sister relationship I'd never truly had. Once in our hotel room, the emotions I'd been holding back broke free. Marcus sat beside me on the edge of the bed, his steady presence an anchor as I processed the night's events. I should feel vindicated, I said, wiping tears with the back of my hand. Instead, I just feel sad. That's natural, Marcus replied gently. You're mourning the relationship you hoped for, not the one you actually had. His insight cut straight to the heart of my confusion. I had spent years hoping Allison would change, that she would become the loving sister I'd always wanted. Tonight had finally forced me to accept the reality that had been there all along. She was never going to change, was she? I asked, though we both knew the answer. People can change, Marcus said carefully. But they have to want to. They have to recognize their behavior is harmful. Allison seems to believe she's the victim in all this. We stayed up late into the night, unpacking decades of manipulation. Marcus, with his outsider perspective, helped me see patterns I'd normalized. The way Allison would create situations where I would look bad or unstable. The subtle undermining comments that made me doubt myself. The constant positioning herself as the reasonable one while painting me as overly sensitive or jealous. You know what the strangest part is? I said as dawn began to lighten the room. Part of me still wants her approval. How messed up is that? It's not messed up, Marcus assured me. She's your sister. It's natural to want that connection, even when it's harmful. Morning brought a flood of notifications on my phone. Missed calls from my parents. Text messages from relatives who had heard various versions of what happened. An email from Nathaniel asking to meet for coffee. Several missed calls from Allison that I had no intention of returning. I decided to start with Nathaniel. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near our hotel while Marcus took a business call in the room. Nathaniel looked exhausted, the events of the previous night leaving visible marks under his eyes. I want to apologize, he began after we'd ordered. I had no idea Allison was capable of something like this. You don't need to apologize for her, I said. You were a victim too. He nodded, turning his coffee cup slowly between his hands. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our marriage, about who Allison really is. I'm starting to realize there were signs I ignored. Over the next hour, Nathaniel shared his own experiences. The small lies he'd caught Allison in over the years. The way certain friends had mysteriously disappeared from their lives after conflicts he never fully understood. Her intense reaction whenever he mentioned spending time with his female colleagues, even in group settings. I thought she was just insecure, he said. Now I wonder if she was projecting her own capacity for deception onto me. He had decided to stay at a hotel indefinitely while considering his next steps. I'm not sure our marriage can recover from this, he admitted. Not just the incident itself, but what it reveals about who she truly is. Back at the hotel, I found 7 new missed calls from Allison and several voicemails ranging from tearful apologies to angry accusations. I blocked her number without listening to all of them. Email, social media, any platform where she might reach me, I cut off access. It felt both terrifying and liberating. My parents were more persistent. When I finally answered their call, my mother was crying. We had no idea, she kept saying. We thought it was normal sister rivalry. Drugging someone isn't rivalry, I pointed out, the anger I'd suppressed for years finally finding voice. Neither is sabotaging their scholarship opportunities or stealing their boyfriend. We failed you, my father acknowledged, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. We should have listened. It was the validation I'd craved for decades, but it came too late to undo the damage. Still, it was a beginning. We agreed to meet when I returned to Chicago to start the long process of rebuilding trust. That afternoon, I received a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Amanda had distanced herself from family gatherings around the time I left for Chicago. Her message was simple but impactful. I always knew Allison was lying about you. She did similar things to me. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. We arranged to video chat, and I discovered I wasn't Allison's only target. Amanda shared stories of Allison spreading rumors about her supposed eating disorder, rumors that had reached her workplace and affected professional relationships. It was Allison's vindictive response to Amanda turning down her invitation to be a bridesmaid, citing financial constraints. I couldn't afford the bachelorette trip to Fiji, Amanda explained. Suddenly, everyone in the family thought I was hospitalized for anorexia. My boss even called to check if I needed medical leave. The conversation with Amanda was healing in unexpected ways. Having another family member validate my experiences reduced the lingering doubt that perhaps I had imagined or exaggerated Allison's behavior. The stress of the weekend manifested physically once we returned to Chicago. Tension, headaches, insomnia, a constant knot in my stomach. Marcus suggested therapy, and for the first time, I was ready to accept that help. Dr. Simmons, a therapist specializing in family trauma, provided a safe space to unpack decades of gaslighting and manipulation. In our first session, she explained that my physical symptoms were common responses to long-term emotional abuse. Your body has been in a state of hypervigilance around your sister, she explained, always waiting for the next attack. Now that you've acknowledged the reality of the situation, your body is processing all that stored stress. The weekly sessions became a cornerstone of my healing process. I learned about setting boundaries, recognizing manipulation tactics, and most importantly, trusting my own perceptions. The constant self-doubt that had been cultivated by years of gaslighting began to recede. Marcus supported me through the process with unwavering patience. When nightmares about Allison woke me in the early hours, he would make tea and sit with me until I could sleep again. When anxiety made it difficult to focus at work, he reminded me to use the grounding techniques Dr. Simmons had taught me. A month after the anniversary party disaster, my parents visited Chicago. It was their first time seeing my apartment, my workplace, the life I'd built without their validation. The conversations were difficult, filled with painful recognitions of how they had enabled Allison's behavior. We always thought you were the strong one, my mother admitted during dinner at my favorite restaurant. Allison seemed to need more attention, more reassurance. We never realized she was manipulating us. I needed you too, I said simply. I just stopped asking because the answer was always no. Their visit marked the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. Not healed, not perfect, but honest in a way it had never been before. When I attended my cousin Jessica's baby shower the following month, it was the first family gathering I'd experienced without Allison's presence looming over me. The absence of her manipulative energy was palpable. I connected with relatives I'd avoided for years, no longer afraid of what stories Allison might have told them about me. You seem different, my Aunt Margaret commented as we helped clear away gift wrapping. More relaxed, more yourself. I am, I replied, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. I'm finally learning who I am without Allison's shadow. 6 months after the anniversary party that changed everything, I sat in my favorite coffee shop in Wicker Park. My journal opened before me. The habit of reflection had become an important part of my healing process, a way to trace my progress and acknowledge my growth. The woman who stared back at me from shop windows and mirrors was different from the one who had hesitantly accepted her sister's invitation half a year ago. Stronger, more certain, less willing to accommodate harmful behavior for the sake of keeping peace. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I'd never thought possible. Weekly phone calls were no longer exercises in surface-level pleasantries, but genuine conversations where difficult truths could be acknowledged. They had finally begun to recognize their role in the family dysfunction, how their preferential treatment of Allison had created the perfect environment for her manipulative behavior to flourish. I was reading about family dynamics, my mother said during our last call. About how parents sometimes designate one child as the problem to avoid looking at the real issues in the family. I think that's what we did to you, Lauren. I'm so sorry. These acknowledgments didn't erase the past, but they created space for a different future. My father had even visited Chicago alone last month, spending a weekend getting to know Marcus and seeing my work firsthand. He'd hugged me before leaving, whispering, "I'm proud of you." Words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. News about Allison came through family channels rather than direct contact. 3 months after the anniversary disaster, Nathaniel had filed for divorce. The carefully crafted image Allison had built in Boston society had crumbled as rumors of what happened spread through their social circle. Several former friends had reached out to Nathaniel with their own stories of Allison's manipulative behavior, painting a picture of a pattern that extended far beyond her treatment of me. Allison hadn't accepted this new reality gracefully. She continued attempting to control the narrative, telling family members that I had fabricated evidence to break up her marriage out of jealousy. That Nathaniel had been planning to leave her anyway and used the anniversary incident as an excuse. That I had always been mentally unstable and had finally orchestrated my ultimate revenge fantasy. A year ago, these stories would have devastated me, reigniting the self-doubt that had been my constant companion. Now, I recognized them for what they were. Desperate attempts to maintain the false reality she had constructed. The truth had been exposed, not just to me but to everyone who mattered. Allison's power over me had been built on isolation and secrecy. Both were gone now. My professional life had flourished in the wake of my newfound emotional freedom. The energy I had previously spent managing anxiety around family interactions was now channeled into creative projects. Our agency had landed 2 major accounts based on campaign concepts I developed, leading to a promotion and my own team of designers to mentor. Marcus had been my steadfast support throughout the healing process, never pushing but always present. Our relationship had deepened through the crisis, his unwavering belief in me providing solid ground when everything else seemed uncertain. Last month, he had proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, and the vintage emerald ring now on my finger represented a future built on genuine love and respect. Perhaps the most significant change was my reconnection with friends Allison had managed to drive away over the years. College friends who had mysteriously stopped returning my calls after conversations with Allison. Coworkers from my first job who had been told I'd spoken badly about them behind their backs. One by one, I reached out, explaining what I now understood about Allison's influence. Many responded with their own stories of manipulation they'd experienced from her. Pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. Family gatherings had taken on a new character. Without Allison's presence, conversations flowed more naturally. Tensions I hadn't even recognized as constant began to dissolve. Holidays were planned without the careful choreography previously required to manage Allison's need to be the center of attention. Therapy continued to be an essential part of my journey. Dr. Simmons helped me recognize the warning signs of toxic relationships in all areas of my life, not just with Allison. I learned to identify the subtle red flags I'd previously ignored, the slight undermining comments, the jokes at my expense, the small betrayals that signaled larger patterns of disrespect. Healthy relationships don't require you to constantly doubt your perceptions, she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself around someone, that's a sign something is wrong with the relationship, not with you. This wisdom extended to my professional life as well. I found myself setting clearer boundaries with clients, no longer accepting disrespectful behavior in the name of maintaining business relationships. Surprisingly, this led to stronger professional connections built on mutual respect rather than appeasement. Marcus noticed the change one evening as we cooked dinner together in my apartment, now our shared home. "You stand taller," he observed, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I stirred risotto. "Not physically, but in how you carry yourself. Like you're no longer trying to make yourself smaller." His observation resonated deeply. I had spent so many years trying to minimize my presence, my needs, my feelings, all to accommodate Allison's insatiable need for attention and validation. Freedom from that dynamic had allowed me to expand into my full self. Perhaps the most difficult question I'd wrestled with was what relationship, if any, I wanted with Allison moving forward. Dr. Simmons had helped me understand the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. "Forgiveness is something you do for yourself," she explained. "It's about releasing the anger and resentment that hurt you. Reconciliation is about rebuilding a relationship, and that requires genuine change and accountability from the person who caused harm." I had begun the process of forgiveness, not because Allison deserved it, but because I deserved to be free from the weight of anger I'd carried for so long. Reconciliation, however, seemed impossible without acknowledgement of the harm done, genuine remorse, and concrete changes in behavior, none of which Allison had demonstrated. The last attempt at contact had come 3 weeks ago. A handwritten letter arrived at my office rather than my home address, Allison's way of circumventing the boundaries I'd established. The contents were a masterclass in manipulation, alternating between self-pitying victimhood and subtle blame, with just enough acknowledgement of wrongdoing to appear contrite while accepting no real responsibility. I recognize the tactics now. The carefully crafted words designed to pull me back into the dysfunctional dance we'd performed all our lives. After reading it once, I shredded the letter and dropped it into the recycling bin. No response was needed. My silence was its own boundary. As I closed my journal that afternoon in the coffee shop, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The journey wasn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat, linear path. There would still be difficult days, moments when old patterns of thinking reasserted themselves, times when the grief for the sister relationship I never had would resurface. But I had learned to build a life based on authentic connections rather than obligatory ones, to recognize that family extends beyond blood relations to include those who treat us with genuine care and respect, to understand that walking away from harmful dynamics isn't selfish or weak, but often the bravest choice we can make. The experience had taught me that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's validation, especially not from those who benefited from my self-doubt. That trusting my own perceptions wasn't arrogance, but necessary self-preservation. That setting boundaries wasn't punitive, but an act of self-respect. Most importantly, I had learned that exposing the truth, however painful, creates space for authentic healing that secrets and silence never could. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to participate in our own diminishment, even when those asking us to do so share our blood. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you find the strength to stand up for yourself? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and growth. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more nurturing than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I hope my journey helps you navigate your own with greater compassion for yourself.